All right. The next game we're talking about is Little Samson, which was nominated by @PatLMurray on Twitter. That is a very creative handle there, PatLMurray. It was developed by Takeru, who I believe are the creators of Kokoron and nothing else, or nothing else that I'm aware of.
Yeah, it's kind of a mystery as to what Takeru did besides Kokoron and this game, which in Japan I believe is called Seirei Densetsu Rikuru.
What's that mean?
Rikuru?
It means Legend of the Holy Bell Rickle, which was his name. The
Rickles, like Don Rickles. This game just got interesting.
Rickle.
Oh, okay.
Could be
Rickle's name.
Could be Lickle. Could be Rickle.
Could be. Yeah, exactly.
Not Kickle Cubicle.
Exactly. Could be.
But that's a very Japanese name. Just like what's in it? Well, there's a bell, and the guy's name is Rickle. All right, it's Bell Rickle. Whatever. That's the name of the game. It's the Adventures of Bell Rickle.
And a ROM hack that turns him into Don Rickles would really make my day.
So
very
get your game fast tracked, submitting Xerxes a ROM hack of this game with the cast replaced by Don Rickle in different outfits.
Don Rickles, yay! Okay, so
it's a platformer.
Okay, so developed by Takeru, it was published by Taito. It was for the NES or Famicom. Earliest release date in territory was June 26, 1992 in Japan, which makes it a very, very late era Famicom.
I mean, this game came out like after Sonic 1 and kind of at the same time as Sonic 2. Like that's
why, yeah.
This is an age of very, very late stage Famicom games that I think were just absolutely brilliant, like Gimmick and Moon Crystal and Just Breed. Like games that just and Metal Slither Glory, games that just push the hardware so much further,
or added completely new hardware via like expansion.
Indeed.
My understanding is this one doesn't do that, and it is a very, very nice looking game. There are a few moments in this game where you could genuinely sell me that this game visually was actually a modern retro sort of like. Retro take on the NES, because obviously like stuff like Shovel Knight adds extra color and little bits of things that it can't do.
Well,
but
Shovel Knight fine, go ahead.
What I'm saying is Shovel Knight breaks the limitations of the NES deliberately for effect in a few places. This game feels like that. We're just like, whoa, this is actually running on the NES stock?
It's like actually on the hardware.
It functions on the hardware. It's got, you can see where they cut the corners, though. I mean, it's not like it's not Shovel Knight, but I did feel like as I was playing through this one that I was really, it's more playable in a way for novices than Gimmick, although it is incredibly hard in its own right. But it doesn't get incredibly hard until kind of late in the game, I think. But which kind of makes me wonder, like, who were these really super late period Famicom games supposed to be for? Like,
I imagine a lot of people
they were for the domestic market. I mean, there were still like 60 million Famicoms in Japan.
But who is buying a game this hard though, right? Like, is it for like the grown-up gamers who can, who have disposable incomes and could buy a Super Famicom whenever they wanted? And
I don't think they were thinking about difficulty in this game though, like the actual designers. I think it just turned out at this difficulty level. They were like, okay.
What this game is to me, just to say, is I feel like they got together and they said, let's make Mega Man, but let's make it better, is what they were trying to do. It
is very Mega Man influenced, but
different, right? Because it's this just because we gotta make sure that this is not. It's still kind of an obscure game. It's famous mostly for being incredibly expensive on the secondhand market, but
Western rarity. Yeah,
it'll cost you a lot to get this. Luckily, you can get it for free. No, I'm just kidding. You can't.
No,
you
totally can't.
No, impossible.
Yeah.
But you can say Mega Man, but I've said that also this one has got a lot of Dragon Trap in there, a lot of this sort of Wonder Boy sort of feel to it, in that it's just kind of.
Yes. Thank you.
To me, it feels like the gameplay feels like it's without like forgetting the RPG elements for a second, the gameplay feels like a much better version of Clash of Demon Head. Like,
I don't really see that personally.
Okay, well, maybe not, but I mean, I'm not talking about like the character switching. I'm just talking about the way the levels are designed and stuff like that. But it has much more interesting stuff happening. Each stage has its own little thing. But we're really getting way ahead of ourselves here because we haven't described to the listeners who might not be familiar with this game what it really is. So when it starts out with like 4, I think, mini stages, each one starring a different character. So there's one that's a boy who throws like kind of jingle bells or something. And he's kind of your jack of all trades. And then you've got the dragon character who can fly or kind of hover Princess Peach style for a period.
Dragon character kicks ass.
He's pretty good, but he's
also has charge shots.
He has charge shots? Really?
Yes.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's really, really important. He kicks ass with those shots, man. He can blow up anything. It's great.
I just used him because his projectile arcs upward. I didn't realize he did a charge shot.
I want to be gender correct here. Actually, the dragon character Kikira is female.
I did not.
Did they change his gender between the English version and the Japanese version? Because I think I read the English manual and I don't.
That's a very good question. I'm mostly familiar with the Japanese version. Seireden Setsurikuru.
Because they had a tendency to do that. They just kind of made everyone. They just they arbitrarily flipped in the US market.
It's a dragon. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. That's what they did. But yeah, so dragon kicks ass. Then you can play as.
Next, and then there's a golem, a stone creature.
I think his big thing is that he's immune to spikes, which gets pretty useful at points.
It does, and also he's
the only character who can attack in 4 directions,
as opposed to just he can strike downward.
Yes,
he can strike downward and he can punch up, which is really useful against
punching
some
up
bosses.
Is really useful. I don't think I ever used the downward, but he is really good at fighting some of the bosses. And then there's the mouse, which is the most Dragon's Trap-esque thing there, because the mouse is really good at climbing up walls, but it also has a Metroid-esque like bomb.
His bombs,
is really cool. But he has very little health, as you'd imagine, because
he moves very quick though, which is actually quite fun to try and run through the levels as the mouse because he's very fast.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I wonder if they're like speed runners who only take KO the mouse through every level, then switch to someone else when it gets to a boss.
I would not be surprised.
I do want to say I like how every character has their own kind of unique kind of mobility. I really appreciate games that give you a lot of different mobility options like this. So
it is. It does.
Yeah,
It's hard. It's a thing that games, I think, from a game design perspective, you don't see a lot because it's really hard to design levels that can be completed by more than one sort of.
I mean, the level design in this game, I think, is especially impressive because all levels are basically designed to be completable with, your 4 characters' completely different skill sets, which is like so Wonder Boy 3, and that plus the sort of Mega Man baseline. I love this game. I remember being a kid and just loving this game.
It's a cool mix. I would say that the way the level design works is pretty specifically. You've got your jack of all trades, Samson or Rickle, and he can basically beat every level in the game by himself. He's kind of the safe baseline character, because if the other characters die in this game, you don't lose a life in the same way. That character dies.
They are permadead.
They're permadead until you get a potion for them, or I think you can pick up hearts or something. I was actually really confused about how the sort of life system works in this to an extent. But effectively, the 3 side characters... the levels are usually designed for one of those 3 to kind of be the character to pick, and they'll do the level really well. And if you lose them, you're like, oh, now I got to try and get through this with Samson here, because the other guys sometimes flop out a bit. And it is fun to try and juggle the 3 characters. So you have bits where you're clearly supposed to be flying with the dragon, and there's bits where the mouse can squeeze through little areas, or you need to be able to dodge like a lot of bullets going on. Or the Rockman, it's usually... because there's spikes is generally how the Rockman works, because there's life and things on spots.
Hey, I just realized
Yes.
something. We're comparing this game to Mega Man, and there's a literal Rock Man in it. I just
So
now,
there is.
I don't know if that was on purpose or what, but I just had to point.
I
out
don't
that
think so.
But what I do like
No,
is
probably not. Probably not.
this game is creepy. Like, the enemies get really unnerving. Like, there's lots of levels that just skulls that shoot skulls and stuff, and it's like,
Yeah.
what the hell is going on?
You have these cutesy, player characters that look like they should be in, I don't know, something from, like, Nintendo or maybe Capcom. And then they fight against these very intimidating-looking bosses who look like a prototype to Dark Souls bosses.
I like how, like, the first real boss of the game is basically Castlevania's Dracula. He teleports, shoots a high and low fireball, and then he turns into a big monster.
Yep.
The game is interesting because it's got this map thing going on, right? I didn't play it long, like I didn't start over too many times, so I'm not sure whether the game can unfold differently. Can you take different paths, or is it always the same?
No, it is a linear game.
I
But
think there
Completely
is
linear.
one different path where if you fall down
is there?
a waterfall, you go to an alternate level. I think that's the only case where that happens, though.
Yeah, I was gonna check, because I fell down that waterfall. If you fight a boss, then I think if you fall down the waterfall, you actually go to a different area than if you beat that boss. So that's neat.
I mean, in terms of Mega Man clone-ish things on the NES, I would say this is like it outranks.
Wampum.
I was gonna say
Samurai
Magical
Pizza
Dorape or something
Korean
like that.
Conquest, the AK.
Yeah,
I would say, like, calling this one a Mega Man clone is probably not doing this game justice, because I think it goes in a pretty distinctive direction.
it does, and
from Mega Man.
it's a Mega Man clone that's a little bit more. It actually does do the same thing as Korean Conquest, though, where you kind of start out with all the abilities, and it's sort of up to you to figure out which ones you want to use where. So the element of like choosing which abilities you're going to pick up in which order to fight which bosses is not part of the game. It's
they all have separate health bars. I guess we should probably make that clear.
yeah, that is pretty.
So
yeah,
that is, you got to juggle that, because you don't want to lose a character, because then they're dead. So then you have to kind of, if you're like, oh, I really want to use this character, but they only have 2 blocks of health left, so maybe I'll just try and risk it with someone else. I think that's really nice. I think that's a cool little feature.
And also,
is.
like, you have to strategize, like when you find like a potion, when an enemy drops a potion, or there's a potion in a level,
whoever picks up the potion,
like, whoever
gets the
picks up the potion gets it, which I
Oh,
think
yeah.
is kind of unnecessary. But
It should be mentioned is not the only way you can play the game. There's easy mode where your alternate characters do not die.
But the easy mode does lock you off from the true ending, as you would expect. The game ends early.
Of course.
I think you miss. Is it 2 or 3 stages you miss? You miss like a block of the game.
I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
at least 3
Yeah.
near the end, yeah. Because games had a tendency to do that back then, to taunt you for picking the easy one, and tell you, like, play the real game, loser.
it's a Golden Axe type thing. It's like the Genesis
Yeah.
Golden Axe. It's
Yes,
like you fight Death Adder Jr.
Yeah, that's right.
Try it again on arcade mode.
Yeah, get better then. This game is pretty hard though. I don't know if we've
Yeah,
completely gone that.
For me, it was really easy up until I think I was about like 3/4 of the way through, and then suddenly it just got incredibly difficult.
Yeah. As these
What you might describe as the Wily Castle sort of bit. Once it hits about there, you're just like, oh, actually, this is really tough. I should have been playing properly.
Yeah, no, it really does spike up in the final levels beyond easy mode, but I guess that's part and parcel there.
Is there anything
and the
else
boss-
we should talk about before we rank it? Because I
One
think
thing that I think is a negative, they tried something which doesn't really work. Each character has their own theme song, and when you select a character, you listen to their theme song. Now, there's
No matter
2
what.
problems with that, in my opinion. Firstly, if you change characters rapidly, you're only ever going to hear about the first 10 to 20 seconds of any of their songs, which is very kind of just like, oh, it's like stop and starts, like, oh, all right, like you get the kind of whiplash. But it also means that the stages, for the most part, don't have their own unique music, which,
right.
given the atmosphere of this game, I would have loved to hear where they went with the different stages. You know, you've got like this stage which is inside a cave, but inside space. It's the most bizarre level.
I wouldn't mind so much if just pausing the game didn't reset the music.
That's okay. So where do we want to put this?
Okay, so it's a very good, very late era Famicom action game. There are many like it.
I was just gonna say, for a sort of like just throw it out there. We looked at Wendy Every Which Way recently, and that got sat down at position 60, I believe. And as sort of starting point, where is that sitting? Does anyone have any feelings about this one?
Oh boy. Let's see.
I mean, personally, I would say that like from a creativity standpoint, although I really admire what they did in Little Samson, it does feel like it is kind of stuck in a not stuck. That's the wrong verb there, but it is kind of very much of its time.
Well, this game could have come out in 88, 89, and it would have been like, okay, cool. This
right.
Is a game. It's good.
There are aspects of it that would seem really forward thinking in a way, but it's not. It's when we say it feels kind of like an indie game that could have been made today, just aping the NES style. I'm saying that just in terms of like the amount of detail and care that went into making it, but it's not.
Which was extreme. I mean, this game.
Yes.
This was not a.
Contextually, this game, if you had like look at the Famicom, the SNES, like what's name was out, like Super Mario had come out by now. Super Mario World had come out and said this is platformers now, and Sonic the Hedgehog was out and it's like, well, now this is platformers, and then you have Little Samson. It's just like, yeah, but maybe we could just keep making this. Like,
yeah, I mean, but it's not. It doesn't feel like let's just keep painting by the numbers type of thing. Like, it does feel like they were really trying to let's make like the ultimate Famicom game. And I don't think it succeeds quite on that front. I think that I would probably put you got your Kirby's Adventure, which is what when I was playing it, I was thinking like, this does feel kind of like a Kirby's Adventure of a series that never really existed on its own and never got didn't really get its own chance to shine.
At this point, you had Kirby, you had Gimmick, which were two absolutely superlative games worth playing, even though Super Famicom was out, even though Mega Drive was out.
Right.
Does this game rank among them?
I mean, it would, but unfortunately, nobody's nominated them yet, so we can't really consider that. I would just say
those games are kind of like, those are almost like Super Famicom being pushed back onto the NES. This one just feels like an NES game that's being given a lot of love and a lot of polish, but it's still kind of not quite like
G.I. Joe
further ahead.
I'm kind of with you, Bob. Like, I like this game. I wish I could afford to buy a real copy of it, but I can't.
Here, let me bump it up a bit. I've been thinking about this.
You could certainly afford the Japanese version.
That's true, and
it probably looks better too, right? Like the box probably is nicer. The cart's probably much more attractive.
Oh yeah, the packaging and manual, without a doubt.
Just get the Famicom version. It'll be way better. Personally, I said Every Which Way is like a replacement point, but. I think something like Zookeeper was a much more astounding game in terms of, forward-thinkingness compared to this. For going in the G.I. Joe area.
I actually wanted to place it a little bit higher. You guys can vote this down, but I'm going to suggest between Blazing Lasers and Dead or Alive 3.
Well,
I mean, for my money, I think Master of Magic is a much more interesting attempt at making a big, bombastic game that maybe shouldn't have tried to push it that far. Compared to it, and Dead or Alive 3 is more of a beginning system mover rather than a late game hurrah. But
yeah, DOA 3 was very much let's get this finished as quickly as possible.
Maybe there's a point there we might want to give it. There's craft involved in this game, which is especially weird considering that the developer is apparently not
great craft.
Done that much. Yeah.
I mean, was the developer somehow related to Taito? Because Taito did fantastic games, so I don't know. Is there? This is like mystery
actually,
developer.
The director, I believe, of Little Samson was the director of the Famicom Strider.
Very interesting.
So, yeah,
really,
there's.
You can't really connect the dots between those two games, but yeah, Strider's a game that really wasn't finished at all. So to say like a fully finished Famicom game from the same person,
Yes,
is interesting. Yeah, I mean, I could do that. I could say as long as it's below Blazing Lasers. I feel like the thing is we drilled every which way because it was too easy, but it's hard. Little Samson is kind of too hard.
it is.
It gets.
Well, one thing I
really
don't
hard.
like about it is when you come up against a boss, if you accidentally start losing your characters, you lose your characters, and then you have to just try and fight the boss with Little Samson.
Yeah,
and
that
he's
was
not
You
really
do,
good at
frustrating.
but
bosses.
I think that's fantastic. That's
I always really hate it though when you have a game that you want to really like, but it's just too hard to really enjoy.
Well, they could have just made the boss battles less grueling, and then it would have been. Then that aspect of it would have been challenging instead of infuriating. Like it's an easy thing to do. Just make the bosses like not absorb so many hits, which they do.
Some of the bosses
It's not a
do
hard
have
problem to fix.
these elements, where it's just like, I know what I'm doing, but I have to do it 12 times in a row, and I screwed up 11,
Really,
so I
really
died.
frustrating, right? So, I mean, you don't have to screw up that many times to just completely lose one of your characters, which is basically like losing the game. Like
In some ways, if you're trying to use the dragon to fly over shots, and then you lose the dragon, well, then you're in the middle of the shots, aren't you?
It certainly depends on the stage, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the
first-
further you get,
I'd say like the first 2/3 of the game are pretty good, and then it
I'd
gets
say the
a
whole
little bit
game is
harder.
good. It just gets harder.
Well, no, it's all hard, but I mean, they're pretty like in terms of difficulty, they're fair, they're good, and then just towards the end, it just suddenly like the difficulty ramps up in a way that's just not, in my opinion, like acceptable. Like it's
I would say the difficulty curve is there. Like, it doesn't shock you by being difficult. It's just, it keeps getting harder.
I felt like I was breezing through it until all of a sudden I just hit a wall. I don't know why, but anyway, I mean, but yeah, I mean that's I think being unnecessarily hard is the same problem as being unnecessarily easy, in that it kind of takes it makes the game, it kind of robs the player of the experience of approaching the game fairly, I guess. It's just like something being too easy is a problem, because it's like, well, I don't have to try very hard to do this.
Although the game does give you a what's the name? It has a password system.
Yes.
It doesn't force you to beat it in one run. You can just write down your little password and keep going. So I think that's
true.
A
And I'd
concession
say,
it does give you.
if I had a choice between a game being too easy and a game being too hard, I'd want it to be a little bit too hard, like, because I can go, if I really love it, I can challenge myself and get better. Whereas if it's too easy, you can't make the game harder unless, I guess, like you play with one hand or something like that. But
okay, so
can we agree below Dead or Alive 3, above Master of Magic?
I mean, I personally think it should be lower, but I'm not gonna. I mean,
I'll live
there's
with
a
it.
lot of people, so I'm probably gonna get outvoted.
See, the thing about DOA 3 is it was mostly a graphics showcase. It was DOA 2.
Okay,
Really-
well, I could
really
even
pretty.
I could even do above DOA 3, below Blazing Lasers. I think that's what Satenga said.
Yep.
Mm. Yeah, I mean,
I'd rather play Little
much-
Samson personally than
As
even
much-
Blazing Lasers. Like, but I feel like Blazing Lasers is a little bit more.
Well, Blazing Lasers was kind of Hudson's, like, of course they'd had Star Soldier on Famicom, and Gunhead Blazing Lasers was like their definitive shooting statement, but
I definitely wouldn't put it above Blazing Lasers. I mean, firstly, Blazing Lasers is called Blazing Lasers, which is a remarkably better name than Little Samson. Little Samson makes it sound like some kind of janky Bible game, to be perfectly honest.
It's true. But Blazing Lasers is actually called Gunhead.
Gunhead is also a fantastic name. I mean, both of those names are better.
He's got a point.
You really can't go wrong. If it were called Gunhead : Blazing Lasers, that's about the only way to improve either name.
And just in the sense that that game followed the Hudson Soft shooting game legacy. Oh, it's tough. Yeah, I will.
All right, it's done.
Above.
It's
yes.
done. All right. So Little Samson goes right below Blazing Lasers, right above Dead or Alive 3, which I think is good. But if that sounds low to you, it's not. First of all the games above it are really good, and also you should still play Little Samson. It's great. Like, find a way to play it, and you will enjoy it at least up to a point.
You will, especially if you're a fan of the Wonder Boy series.
Or Mega Man. If you like both of those, actually,
yes.
That'd be perfect.
If you like both of them, it's even better.
If you're listening to this and you are a fan of that sort of like Shovel Knight and that retro sort of NES game, you should definitely play this if you haven't, because it is...
Somebody nominate Shovel Knight, we're in trouble.